It's actually cool to see people still outside talking. We can really feel that people are missing those moments of, face-to-face contact, right? So I'm okay with that. So it's a pleasure to be here, first and foremost. Like Anya said, Antonio, Portuguese, working for SentinelOne as a technology strategist. XDR specifically for me isn't new. I recall talking about XDR probably for the first time publicly back in 2018. And we actually talked today, and I saw some of my fellow presenters talking about evolution, transformation, the time to adoption of these evolutions and transformations. And there's obviously a moment in time where it becomes a bit more common in mass market. And I think we're actually at that point. Stats were also presented about the adoption of XDR, people in organizations looking into the adoption of XDR, something like 60%, as we heard, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. Now, I want to eventually just open up a more transparent conversation of what XDR should mean to you in general, right? Knowingly so that XDR might mean different things in some aspects for every one of you, including also for the companies out there creating these technologies. XDR is, to begin with, not a product, at least not in my view. It's definitely a vision. It's definitely a path. And hopefully, I don't know, I'm gonna cross my fingers that we are not going to get any new 3-letter acronym, security technology for the time being, and that XDR really becomes that kind of mutant, adaptable, and I think adaptation is really top of mind nowadays for everyone. And a meaningful adaptation without actually becoming more complex for companies to continue evolving and transforming. So myth busting. I won't do any explosions of cars like the Mythbusters from National Geographic, so sorry about that. But hopefully this is cool. All right, challenges. And again, thank you for all of my fellow presenters that did an awesome job in many of the points of challenges within the industry. I will reiterate some of those. Point number one is attack surface is expanding rapidly to a point where, and again, for all various reasons, it's because of native cloud adoption. No longer that lift and shift that we have seen from a server in the data center to IaaS in the cloud, to naturally the expansion of things like identity, because we need it for hybrid workplace, for business to business, business to customer, supply chain, and so on and so forth. IoT, and now becoming even more pervasive, things like metaverse. What happens here is that all of this rapid expansion and the pressure that all of our organizations feel to remain competitive makes it so in a way that often we have a lot of blind spots. Or simply, you might be unaware of what is the attack surface that new technology that we're adopting or that new path that you're taking brings you into the table. And the fact is that obviously attackers are going to profit that to the limit. The other bit is that we also heard many of these points here, that it's complex from a cyber security stack point of view for the majority of the organizations out there. Numbers were given, I have some other numbers, but we are all in agreement that eventually for large organizations might be up to 70 plus security tools, different tools for different purposes. And this is almost like this, I call it whack-a-mole. Do you know the game whack-a-mole? It's exactly like, new threat. I need to buy something else to mitigate this, right? And this is definitely not scalable and not efficient. The other bit is then, obviously, we all go into this disjoint, siloed approach of different technologies. Now, there might not be nothing inherently wrong with having different solutions. I'm not saying the opposite. It's really about the way that, unfortunately, the industry overall hasn't worked together. We're now seeing the brinks of it. like the standardization of data schemas that we're now seeing across multiple companies, or the standardization of APIs. And hopefully this will create to you the capability to have less siloed, more unified, more converged solutions. But obviously, as they are siloed, they are disconnected, lack of correlation, lack of context, what happens? You need to put people powering the technology. You know, you might see this like in all of the presentations. Yes, there is a cybersecurity skill shortage, that is true. But I am of the opinion, if I have an inefficient system, I can put as much resources, as much energy, like limitless energy. It's not going to become more efficient. Do you agree? Right? So yes, it is a problem, but again, just by putting more people behind screens is not going to solve the issue. And obviously this all sums up into reactive processes and flows, because that's the way that we often respond to things, right? The lack of eventually being proactive or capable of being proactive and automated in face of threats, and specifically unknowns of the unknowns. So why XDR and why now? As I mentioned before, XDR is not new. It's now reaching the mass market. Like we're past that bleeding edge of adoption, and now everyone is kind of, and rightfully so, I mean, they waited for it to settle, the dust to go away, and become a bit more tangible, I would say. But again, current security tools are often not up to the task. We came from legacy AV into EPP, but EPP often is also limited. SIEM and SOAR have a lot of promises still on the table, but often it's difficult to extract the actual value of those products and require, once more, a lot of maturity and expertise and investment to be able to actually draw those middleware layers across all of that very heterogeneous security stack that you have, complex one, often within your own organization. Adversaries are becoming way more sophisticated and often way more advanced than all of us, right? Because they have a lot of funds, because they have a lot of expertise, because once more, money attracts money, money attracts people. And unfortunately, if you look into 2021, you've seen ransomware payouts reaching things like $20, $40 million. Just think about the amount of money that a ransomware group has nowadays and the amount of money they are making. So obviously they can be way more advanced than the majority of the enterprise organization out there. And it's only normal, again, it's not new. If you look back into history, looking back into malware, for example, the zoos, I think it's a very iconic one. You'll probably recall it being almost like the first malware as a service. They stopped actually doing the attacks and started selling a kit. And guess what? They did a lot more money, right? Ransomware as a service now is common, right? Ransomware groups are no longer actually executing the attacks. They're selling subscriptions with full 24/7 premium support, high availability, high resilient networks, often being capable of taking large denial of service hits against them. So very, very challenging to obviously make front to these bad boys, right? Cloud transformation has created cybersecurity blind spots. We already mentioned this before. On average, with all of these tools that companies have, anyone has an idea of average of alerts per day that a typical organization receives? Any guesses? I don't have chocolates, I'm sorry. Don't be shy, come on. Any guesses? 100. Anyone? Takes? No? 200? No? 1,000? 10,000. Average of 10,000 alerts per day. Now, again, going back to the inefficiency of the system, almost like thermodynamics and entropy within thermodynamics. You can put a lot of energy, but eventually not all of it returns as usable energy. And that all creates the need to obviously respond manually and try to stitch a lot of things together manually. So analysts overall show exactly, or through their studies that they conduct, reflect exactly what customers are telling us and what typically everyone is complaining about. I have 25 to 49 tools, and again, this is for medium-sized companies. Larger ones, 70 plus. That's just inimaginable to manage. 10 plus vendors, and again, everyone kind of admits that it's siloed. That leads to what? Gaps. Gaps of visibility, gaps of detection, and everyone is trying to build eventually, again, the middleware layer, which is not easy. So as we kind of went through several of the evolutionary waves of threat detection and response, we got to this point, right? Once more, we came from EPP, or legacy AV, then EPP, and then we decided that, rightfully so, that we needed to do what? Assume breach, because standing up walls was no longer sufficient. Then came along EDR, and then we said, okay, it'll be awesome to actually package and bundle EPP and EDR. Makes sense, right? Preventative detection response. And then came along NDR, cloud detection and response, SIEM and SOAR, and all of it together. We kind of decided, and again, rightfully so, that now it's the stage where we need to start putting these components, these disparate siloed pieces, working together in prol of everyone. Even if that means, once more, that a given vendor doesn't operate in all of those realms. Reality is that, as with any buzzword, and again, this is business in the end of the day, right? People will jump trains or jump into the train just to say that they are capable of doing more business and catering for the requirements or the necessities of organizations out there. So it is unfortunate because you will get a lot of noise that everyone is claiming to have XDR, and they can supply to you an XDR vision or help you with your XDR vision. So you'll have different types of solutions out there. The ones that eventually have, for example, their portfolio just stitched together, assembled a nice console, and they will say, yeah, we have XDR because we do all of this. But eventually, from an integration point of view, correlation, it's still a bit immature. And now, there's one point that most of you definitely are trying to achieve, which is consolidation of cybersecurity technology. In my humble opinion, consolidation is not equal to going to a single vendor, right? Once more, it's kind of going into the realm of what makes sense to you in terms of cybersecurity tech and how it actually talks together or talks in between each other. Then you have data analytics platforms that out of the blue said, oh, we have XDR capabilities. We can ingest all sorts of information from all sorts of sources. And there you go, like correlation, insights, and that's it, right? But you're actually missing at the foundation of aspects like the preventative layers, the detection, the response layers, the automation of that across all of those disparate platforms and silos. Yes, you might have data unified and somewhat correlated, but you're missing on everything else. Then you have EDR vendors, some of them best of breed, actually doing point integrations with other technologies. Sometimes even not a security technology by itself, can be like a productivity layer, like email, and saying, hey, here's an XDR solution for you. We can actually spot the emails going in and out and correlate that with endpoint detection and response, telemetry. Then you have naturally also the SIEMs, and specifically the next-gen SIEM vendors and the SOAR vendors claiming also, well, we have an XDR vision for you. Here's a couple of playbooks, data ingestion capabilities across different stacks, and there you go, like you have XDR. And lastly, we have MSSPs that often have created over the last decade a lot of custom middleware, bespoke tools to actually stitch data from different platforms, and it was called something else like a year ago, 2 years ago, and now it's called XDR. Again, I'm not bashing anyone. I'm not saying that this is wrong. You have to ensure that the things that you're betting is exactly what you are trying to achieve in terms of vision, right? And that actually delivers the greater value to you at the end of the day. So the quest for optimized security operations often falls into this trap of, oh, I'm trying to achieve a single pane of glass. But in reality, what people try, or what people get, is what I call a single glass of pain, right? Which wants more XDR by itself as a vision, and often what it's being offered doesn't necessarily give you that at the left side. And again, buzzwords, high-speed trains, business money talking, everyone promises something. And often those promises are over the moon. I'm not a fan of often saying to a company, yeah, you're gonna have like 80% reduced cost. That's highly biased. It depends on the maturity of automation that you have. It depends on the maturity of what you have as a cybersecurity stack, your security program overall. Let alone saying that I'm going to reduce like 50 times the alert volume. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, if I transform alerts into incidents and I just group them with very basic context like time, did I reduce the alert? Yes, I did. Is there any context to it? No. I'm not actually helping anyone. But there is an overall agreement on the key value proposition of XDR. And I think that at this, we are all on the same boat. It's all about bringing together all of that goodness of security technology that we have, or that you are investing in, and making it so to actually reduce the mean time to detect, the mean time to investigate and respond. And then making the actual system, as I mentioned, way more efficient than it is. And I'm actually going then to improve SecOps efficiency and skill set. I was actually talking to a colleague of mine, and I was saying that typically organizations face a dual challenge when it comes to cybersecurity skills. Not only the hiring process, but even more so retaining people. If you have a very inefficient security program, if technology is not actually helping you, and if people are, for example, triaging random alerts, picture again the 10,000 alerts per day, instead of doing meaningful work, what do you think is happening? What do you think it will happen? They will leave. They will find something else. So actual retention of skills is even more hard than just hiring them. Naturally improve the performance and scale of our security capabilities, and in the end, reducing complexity, reducing cost. It's all top of mind, right? So let's try to debunk some myths very quickly then. Myth number one is that XDR can exist without a EDR or solid EDR foundation. Well, it might, but reality is that EDR is still the most efficient of the threat detection and response pieces of a security stack, and that efficiency have been publicly proven so. So the other point is, although that credentials, for example, are now the key path for compromise of companies, majority of that credential obtention is happening at the exploitation of devices. So it is important to keep in mind that even within your own security program and vision of XDR, that EDR sits at the core of it, exactly to bring you the highest value possible. But XDR is obviously going to add vital non-endpoint telemetry into that attack kill chain, right? It's going to bring billions of points of telemetry, transform that into eventually hundreds of suspicious behaviors or anomalies, and hopefully so give you just a handful of incidents that you can actually focus, pinpoint, and remediate, or mitigate. And naturally reducing the alert fatigue, improving the SOC efficiency, and more importantly, reducing the dwell time of attackers within your environment. Myth number two, XDR is just a next-gen SIM. Well, again, reality is, and again, in our opinion, in my humble opinion, that they are very complementary. We shouldn't be actually saying that one replaces the other fully, because that's not true. But there are definitely areas of clash, right? Where a SIEM, for example, can be highly objective for things like governance and compliance, XDR is not. And again, SIEM is not inherently trying to solve the challenge that XDR is trying to solve. Plus, again, it might be actually not the best solution in terms of licensing model for exactly the challenges that you're trying to solve. So again, working together, not so much clashing against them. Number 3, automated response means loss of control. And I think this is something that has been changing over time. We've been talking about automation more and more over the years, specifically with the birth of EDR and then SOAR, although SOAR often is still very complex, unfortunately, for the majority of the organization. And I think XDR actually brings a kind of breath of fresh air, which is departing from the principle that XDR natively should accommodate a lot of your requirements out of the box. Probably 80% of the typical automated response capabilities that you want should be there and should be common across everyone in this room. Then naturally, I would say that SOAR has its place, and custom playbooks also have this place, their place, that is. But again, not everyone is going to delve and directly dive into building their SOAR platform for their day-to-day automations. Those might be very specific use cases that doesn't necessarily clash with the common ones. The other bit that is important is that XDR respects the human element. Machines are very good at doing exactly things like data collection and search, convergence of data, or pattern matching, summarization, generalization. But when it comes to things like adapting information like context, intuition, the human element is important. So again, providing the capabilities within XDR for it to cater for flexibility of controls, for context of the organization, for learning with the guidance and the prescribed guidance that eventually the human element has added over time is important for you to gain confidence and for the platform also to learn on what to do next on an automated way. And myth number 4 and last is that more data yields better detection. Like, and everyone is talking about like, oh, we need to add more sources of data, security data, and I'm gonna get like immediately more and better detections. Well, that's unfortunately also not true. And for those that have eventually delved into data lake, like security data lakes projects, you probably have seen that like firsthand. It's super complex when it comes to, solving all of the challenges of data ingestion, data normalization. Is it structured? Is it unstructured? Do I need to build my data parsers? Do I need to build all of the data parsers? What is the added value of this data in the attack chain? When I'm gonna use it? And eventually, like all of the challenges when it comes to storing data and the tiers of data, hot, cold, archive, and what's the historical lens that I need to have, and the speed of access to it, and obviously going back then into the points of cost, right? All of the licensing that might be the best fit for you. XDR should help you democratize the access to your security data in making things exactly like all of that complexity of data ingestion and data retention a pain of the past, and you should be focusing on the actual value of the data. So that's what XDR should bring to you. And again, keep top of mind exactly that point. So the key takeaways is exactly like you want to achieve better data speed and scale. XDR is all about data and data analytics. You want complete visibility, ingestion, correlation, and actions, automated resolution across the entire stack. And you want eventually a platform that provides you the extensibility, I call it even more, the interoperability, the future interoperability of working with what you have and working with eventually what you need in the future. Once more, supporting itself on standards, on open concepts. Again, we have open XDR, native XDR, hybrid XDR as constructs. And it's important that that platform is adaptable enough to evolve with you and your needs, and not once more siloing you into a specific space. And overall, reducing complexity. I mean, we want technology empowering humans and not you empowering technology. Otherwise, it will be perpetuating exactly what we are doing today. And that is it. Thank you.